All right, thank you very much for the introduction. And good evening to everybody. It's great to see you all in person. We have, and I'd like to thank Scott Pentel and the entire LSI team for putting on another fantastic event and to let us all gather here. We have an exciting panel assembled for this evening with a range of experienced and active venture investors. This is going to be a lively and open discussion about the current state of med tech and healthcare investment. And we'll be touching on unmet needs, markets and their dynamics, technologies and even teams and their portfolios. So as I was introduced, I am the commercial GM at Triple Ring Technologies, and Triple Ring is the co-development company. We stand side by side with innovators and entrepreneurs to solve hard problems, launch breakthrough products, and to start companies, build companies. We are a big team of doers that work on complex systems for life sciences, med device, healthcare generally. So if anyone needs help building product and access to early stage capital, we'd love to talk. So we'll begin our session this evening with introductions of each of our panelists, starting with Dan on the end. Over here, starting with Dan here. Thank you. Looking the wrong way. Yeah. And then working through the list. And so yeah, please go right ahead and start.
Dan Gallus. I'm a partner at Providence Ventures. I'm partner at Providence Ventures, which is the venture capital arm of Providence Health System, which is a large integrated delivery network based out of Seattle area. We operate about 50. The system operates about 50 hospitals and 900 ambulatory clinics, and performs range of services, both post-acute and acute care services. And the mission of our venture arm is to find innovative technologies, software, services, medical devices that one, we look to invest in them to generate a financial return for the system, but pretty importantly and pretty prescriptively, we only do so in looking at companies that we can see a tangible relationship with the system. So in the case of medical devices, all right, is that better? You can hear me? So at Providence Ventures, basically, we look for innovative companies that can make an impact on our system. And the first thing we do, we go look for those innovative companies, find them and talk to the stakeholders that are relevant to, and introduce them to our key stakeholders and try and drive education and relationships there. And when those come together, then we take looks at opportunities of investing. We've invested in 28 companies over the past 7 years, and invest between $5 and $10 million in those companies, and then work closely with them like a traditional venture capital fund would within Providence.
Hi, can you hear me? Good? Thumbs up. It's a good start. Amy Beltramindo. I'm a co-founder and managing partner of Convey Capital, which is a new venture fund that we kicked off in July of last year. My background is actually strategic venture. I came out of Kaiser's venture capital program, and then before that, Covidian's venture capital program. And Convey is really about driving a similar benefit of the strategic interaction, so strategic LPs and then financial LPs, to really drive the ability to advance innovations. We're focused more on health tech, but really from a device perspective, it's where technology data interacts with medical technology to really change the delivery of care as a game changer. So, we're really focused on that aspect of medtech. I started my medtech career at Guidant, so I've got a long history on the technology side, and really excited to be here.
Can you guys hear me? Okay. Cheung. I'm a partner at NEA. We're a 40-plus-year-old firm with $23 billion plus under management over that period of time. NEA 17 was a $3.6 billion fund. diversified across tech and healthcare. I have been here for 4 years. I was previously with another venture firm called Miriu. Before that, I co-founded a now commercial laparoscopic instrument company, and then before that, I spent about a decade in BD and M&A at 3 Orange County firms: Edwards Life Sciences, Bausch & Lomb, and AMO, and I have engineering MD and MBA degrees before that. We invest across all the spectrum of medical devices, really looking for billion-dollar plus TAMs, investing typically at Series B or at the very earliest stages, but we'll invest all the way through commercial rounds. Nice to meet everyone.
Good evening, everyone. Oliver Keown. I'm Managing Director at Intuitive Ventures. We're the investment arm of Intuitive Surgical, a company that's pioneered the field of surgical robotics. We're structured as a $100 million fund focused on early stage investments in the ecosystems of minimally invasive care, companies that are really transforming the field, pushing the digital, therapeutic, and diagnostic opportunities of minimally invasive care forward. We're typically investing $500,000 to $5 million in seed, Series A, Series B investments, but ultimately we're pretty flexible across those stages. Part of our view of the world is where we can really add differentiated value to those opportunities, leveraging the mothership, the key assets and strengths of our corporate parents, but taking a very clear financial lens and really driving that independent value creation for those companies and aligning ourselves around the independent path that those companies are pursuing.
And Rick Vandevenne, Managing Director at River Cities Capital Funds. We just rebranded in January to RC Capital. Currently investing out of our 7th fund, so we've been actively investing in healthcare for 28 years, 140 or so investments over the years. And for us, healthcare is medical devices, healthcare services, and healthcare IT. We're growth equity focused, so typically companies on the medtech side will have commercialized the product, have some revenue, maybe 4 to 30 million or so, and we come in with a sort of tried and true playbook to help scale the business up, and then hopefully find the right strategic partner or public offering.
Yeah, super. Thank you very much. So, am I back on? Good. All right, so I'd like to start our discussion this evening by reflecting back on the last couple of years, and particularly on the resiliency of the economy and of markets. Just think back even 18 months from now when most of our clinical trials were halted due to a lack of beds. And yet the industry and venture investing in the industry has been record-breaking. So if you can reflect, or I'd like your perspectives on the wild ride of the last couple of years. And I want to start with you, Amy. What made you emerge from the relative safety of a COVID lockdown to start a venture fund now?
Truth. Well, I have to say, there's nothing like a global pandemic to say, hey, life's short, you only live once. If there's something you want to do, go do it. And I know there's tons of entrepreneurs in the audience who have made that commitment, and then often time and time again. So kudos to you, be much humility to that process, because I think it's so great to just, bust out and try something that you think is valuable. I think the other thing is, from a health tech, so the digital enablement component of everything, the first moments of COVID was a lockdown, but then there was an explosion of disruption where no one was doing anything the way that they were doing it before, and we obviously had a lens from a payer provider perspective at that point to say everyone had to change what they were doing overnight. And from a venture perspective, you see that as an inflection point, because things were brewing, that technology was available, but you didn't have to use it, and then suddenly everyone collectively, provider, payer, patient, had to use digitally enabled technology. And so it really meant that there was a new opportunity. We're still in the early innings of that, I would describe, but it felt like this was a time to really sort of, push something forward. And then in terms of our model, which is, really similar in terms of being able to bridge the strategic, particularly payer provider side with the technology. What I would say about sort of the convergence of sort of tech and med tech and tech and healthcare is that it's actually much more integrated into the workflow, much more new. And so actually there's a lot of value to be gained by being able to sit at that nexus. And so we felt like we had a model that we could really push forward to develop that and really create value for the system to then be able to bring new technologies. I think that's the hardest thing, is that you're building something, particularly in sort of a new landscape, is how do you relate to the system that exists and being able to provide that insight from both perspectives. And that really where we felt like that was a value we thought we could add based on our experiences. So we wanted to put that together and kick it off.
And Rick, could you describe how the pandemic and the recent past has changed the way you've done things, or
Yeah,
even...
a lot of what you said. I think when you look at telehealth, right? That was an industry that a lot of money had gone into. A lot of companies were sort of struggling and battling it out for 1%, of the opportunity. And it was amazing to see how fast the hospital systems and physicians were able to adopt and rapidly, make that part of their workflow. And within 3 weeks in some cases, it went from 1 or 2% of visits were telehealth to 85, 90% telehealth, and pretty amazing to see that. And now it's reverted back to maybe 14 or 15%, but that's still an incredible growth over a pretty short period of time. And I think that's just an example of how technology can be used in innovative ways in healthcare. So I think we're seeing more and more of that. From a venture perspective, I didn't get on a plane for a year and a half, right? And so, but we were still looking at lots of companies and talking to people and doing deals. And so, we did not do a deal where we did not meet the management team in person, at least at one point. But I think there were some funds who were making investments in companies sight unseen. So that's exciting. I think now, the diligence process, we typically will be able to do a lot more on Zoom before, and can even get to term sheets and things like that before people are traveling on planes. And that just makes us more efficient. We're able to process and evaluate a lot more companies than we were before. So it's good for us too.
Nice. Oliver, I saw you shaking your head, so you had similar...
Yeah, we did invest in companies where we hadn't met management teams, and I joined Intuitive in the summer of 2019. I was hired to help formulate a venture strategy and launch a new venture investing effort. I think in March, April time, I was just at the point where we'd formulated a thesis, an approach, how could we leverage Intuitive's DNA, which has had incredible success really ideating and innovating from an early stage and bringing that to really create a new market. And so our thesis was early stage investing structured as a fund, and then the global pandemic hit. And I was going into some of these meetings with our pitch wondering, is this going to fly? How does the company? And for us, Intuitive leadership really saw this as an opportunity to lean into uncertainty, to innovate, to structure our approach, and stick with that thesis. Early stage investing, where can we add differentiated value? And that was incredible to be able to participate, to add capital and support to early stage companies for all the reasons described. Incredibly rich time to be innovating, and so many wonderful CEOs and companies out there doing it in this tough time.
Yeah, nice. Dan, would you likewise?
No, it's being a part of a large health system like we are. It's been an interesting and humble kind of ride, being a venture capitalist in an organization of 130,000 caregivers, which I didn't. My mom was happy when I told her I'm a caregiver. They call us all caregivers at Providence, and it's very different than many of the caregivers within our organization. We're on the front line, so it is humbling from that perspective. But to see it, even at my level, and see the changes that COVID has wrought in terms of how we deliver care, and there was this short-term spike, but the evolution and the pushing on the acceleration pedal is something I've never seen in my 25 years, where starting with telehealth, but it's really starting with transforming how providers are going to look to have to contract to get closer to the premium dollar, because fee-for-service all of a sudden was not a very good thing when the spigot gets cut off. So there's a move towards that, and I think that's accelerating, which is important, I think, for medtech companies to understand. And I think it's a good thing as it relates to medtech, because a lot of things in medtech where you try to get extra premium price doesn't accrue to the clinicians or the providers, it accrues to the payer when you're having better outcomes and so forth. So I think that there's a good opportunity there with respect to some of the dynamics that are going to be happening in the industry. Also the multimodal care, where whether it's virtual, the push towards even more outpatient, and again, an issue for moving from our hospitals, which we have 50 of them, it's part of our mission as an organization, but we want them to, they're going to be smaller, right? We're going to have a lot less inpatient surgery that happens, even though that's where we make our money today. We're going to push it to hospital outpatient. We're being big deals in ASCs and partners there, which has huge implications on medtech in terms of that DRG and that payment. We've got a company in the orthopedics area that is a much lighter alignment system for doing kind of semi-robotic surgery for joint bundles, and we're introducing them into our group there because it's a good alternative for orthopedic surgeons who like to do that in the inpatient environment, but a lot of these procedures are now getting pushed outpatient, and it's challenging with some of the technologies to be able to bring those into those environments. So I think there's a lot of change on the horizon related to the economics and how providers are going to look to contract and get paid in the future that will impact medtech.
Touch on that in a bit later. And so, Tack, when we spoke last week, you said there's been many changes, or reactions to the last couple of years at NEA, but also you had some international thoughts as well.
Oh yeah, sure. So I think the last, say, half decade has actually been really interesting from a med device perspective. There's been a massive expansion, along with all the capital markets, in funding, startups across the board, but specifically within medtech, and there's been IPOs and M&A, and it's been some of the best years in decades for medtech. I think what you're referring to is actually we did analysis, how exciting it's been in the U.S. The IPO market has just been fantastic. It's been the best that we've seen in decades. I'd encourage everyone here to continue to focus internationally as well, as there's as many IPOs as there have been in the United States. There's been twice as many IPOs in China worth over $1 billion as there have been in the United States in medtech. So I encourage everyone to continue to look, internationally as well for exits and for money as well. I think it's an opportunity.
And then anything else inside NEA that was remarkable over the last, even 6 months?
Yeah, it's like the pandemic. Within the first week we had an IPO, M&A, and 2 investments that got pulled within a week. It was pretty amazing. That IPO ultimately happened. The M&A ultimately happened. The investments ultimately happened. But we did end up retrenching, and there was a new normal. I think we initially focused on making sure that all our companies had enough money to make it through, and actually I think we didn't really lose any, which is fantastic. And more capital's been coming in, and so we're looking for, hopefully the IPO markets will reopen. Honestly, even though the public valuations have come down in medtech, they haven't come down as much as in, say, consumer or healthcare services or biopharma. So I think there's still an opportunity for our companies to do well. Unfortunately, the private valuations really haven't come down. We're gonna wait a little bit, maybe. Amy's smiling, she's waiting too. But I think those will correct over time as well. But we're still super excited about the future.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I'm going to switch gears a little bit, but our focus this week is on medtech innovation and the companies that are driving it. And we have some of the best startups in the world here with us today. So I'd like to give them an opportunity to learn about how each of you invest and what you require to make your investment decisions. And so I'd like to start this part with Oliver. And if you could briefly lay out just the essentials of an investable opportunity, and what are the table stakes essentially for considering an opportunity?
Yeah. Well, certainly, as you say, incredibly sophisticated audience and trailblazers that have experienced, the navigation of deals and heard probably millions of investors talk about table stake, investment terms. So I won't belabor that. Addressable market, big unmet needs, so on, so on. I think for us at Intuitive Ventures, it starts with our North Star, which is advancing the field of minimally invasive care and the ecosystems that will drive better outcomes for patients. And so we look actually really diversely across medical devices, biotech, digital. We look at the convergences of those areas, and we bring it back to the North Star of minimally invasive care, and that bubbles up for us some critical questions. Are you helping shift care as robotics has, from trauma to the most minimally invasive approach, maybe even to non-invasive, maybe to prevention and cure ultimately? Can we use this technology to detect disease earlier, to identify and characterize disease better so that we can treat it better? Can we maybe deliver therapies or brand new therapies to the right patient, maybe to the right place in situ in the body? And I think if we can find really exciting, passionate teams that are compelled and making differentiated innovation in those spaces, for us that's minimally invasive care, and that rises to the top of the kind of excitement pile, and then it goes to the basics, and we'll look to see if this is an investable opportunity to deploy capital. But that first filter I think is critical for us to get to a point where we can deploy capital and forge a partnership with the startup that we're investing in.
Yeah, thanks. And Dan, as another institutional investor, can you give your perspective on this as well?
Yeah, I think from a venture capital perspective, it's a good question to ask any venture capitalists, because some stage, everybody's got their own view of that and what their own strategy is. For us, we're typically on the medtech side looking at companies. We'll look at things that are certainly clinical stage. Most of the things we're doing are commercial stage, and part of that's just our strategy of where can we add value. We want to get visibility on how we can add value, and providing, there's elements of clinical stage devices where we can make introductions, and we've got leading clinicians in 50 community-based hospitals where we can be parts of studies and provide some feedback. We can also have a pretty good insight with respect to economics and what our tech assessment committees at a large system like this, which are getting harder and harder to get new technologies into, what they're looking for and what you can be prepping for, because you never prep too early for that. So we're typically looking at companies that are either at that clinical stage or commercial, where we can educate our different program managers in the different specialty areas and these virtual clinical institutes that we have, to provide that information to those clinicians, just like your sales reps would be trying to do, and provide a filter of credibility that I think a lot of the clinicians appreciate and our program managers appreciate, so we can get in front of them. They're going to make the call about what's the right thing to do for our patients, but we try to help make the connections and connect the dots there.
So Rick, so at RC Capital, what are you guys looking for specifically, or was differentiated about your approach?
So I think part of it is, I think, like what's been talked about, is sort of the value that we can bring to the opportunity. We want to make sure that we have relationships, connections. We've got 28 years of experience, so we've seen a lot of ways that companies have stumbled. We've been fortunate to have partnered with some great entrepreneurs that have built some amazing companies over the years, and so we try and leverage those relationships and connections, along with relationships with hospital systems that we have as well. And so that's kind of a big part of it, is kind of just the experience and connectivity, and sort of the roll up your sleeves and kind of jump in alongside the entrepreneurs to help them build these businesses. And because we've seen it many times, we have visibility. So try and talk about what's sort of coming around the corner that may disrupt the path of the company, and make sure that we're heading on the right direction. So
27 years, you said.
Yeah, 28 I think
28,
now.
Yeah. And then in TAC, it's been 40 years for NEA, right?
Yeah. We think about most important is obviously teams. We always talk about that, and you know, the three-legged stool is teams, market, and technology, and obviously specifically for you know, healthcare and medical technologies, you got to add regulatory and reimbursement in there as well. You know, we think about you know, really ideally taking one deep risk, maybe two across those spectrum, across those 5 issues. You know, we would not do that with respect to team, but you know, so for example, you know, it is easy to make a earlier stage bet if the reimbursement and clinical path is clear. If it's not clear, we will probably wait until there's a decent amount of, say, clinical data, and be willing to maybe take the reimbursement risk. But taking the risk all the way across the board is not super easy. We will do that if it's an amazing team, but otherwise, especially you know the way that reimbursement has been playing out recently, you know, it is tough to make early stage bets where you're going to have to take all those risks across the board.
Amy, you're on your first or second of a 40-year run, right?
So like
Yeah.
40 years, 27 years, 9 months.
Yeah.
It's but, yeah, 16 years for me on the investing
Sure.
side.
To Convey.
We got to Convey, exactly. But you know, we're focused on the digital enablement component and where that is the operative element, the game changer, and how you deliver care, how you create access, quality, and different economics. But for us, then, therefore, you know, that's a far more integrated approach to a healthcare system or a payer. And so we are focused on sort of the top priorities for those, you know, strategic players, so that they will focus on that. Because I would say the thing that I've taken away, I started my career 20 years ago on the health system side, but implementing change. And I think the thing that gets overlooked or underappreciated is that actually behavior change is actually the hardest thing. Change management is the most expensive thing. It's not the technology, it's the change management. And there's only so much innovation any one organization can take at once. And so you really have to be above the waterline in terms of, hey, I'm going to change my workflow, I'm going to change my systems, I'm going to change this and that in order to, you know, take this new innovation on. It could be good, but if it's not above the waterline, you know, you can't devote the resources organizationally to take it on. And so we really focus on, you know, and we're really focused on with our strategic partners, what are those top elements, things they must change and must devote resources to, so that they have the time and attention to implement them. And I think that's, you know, we think it's, you know, incredibly exciting, but it's also a very pragmatic approach to, hey, the juice has got to be worth the squeeze, and the squeeze is really challenging. And so really have that perspective when we look at new technology. Can you produce either the ROI or the clinical quality impact of that technology, and to make it something that we really are interested in?
Nice. Okay. And I'd like to shift the conversation to technology and direct a question at Dan. Dan, you're aligned with a $27 billion healthcare system. In your perspective on the fitting new technology into clinical workflows is somewhat unique. And so if you could kind of describe how that gets done with a group like yours.
Yeah, there's two angles to it. I think when we're thinking about, just in general, when we're thinking about the things we're thematically what we're looking at, and it applies to software services and medical devices, some of the, you know, exciting things that were talked about before that COVID has wrought from a innovation perspective, thematically, I think create a lot of opportunity related to changes, again, in payment and how you think about economics for provider organizations that are going to be thinking differently. We're a $27 billion revenue system that just lost $700 million last year before investment income or whatever. So systems are under pressure, and they're going to need to change, and it's going to change how they look to contract. And payers aren't stupid, so they will not just give up margin. So it's going to be a challenge. But also how we're delivering that care and doing a lot more outside of the walls of our care. You think about old style healthcare is show up, sit in the office. There's an attentiveness to the consumer that's changed, and a lot of that's been brought by this awareness of, wow, that was easy. You think about, whether it's Amazon, you click a button and it comes. Telemedicine, you now click a button. Every consumer, every physician now has been forced to wake up and see how this works. And it's like, that works pretty good. So I think there's going to be a lot of change with respect to where people are getting care. So you got to think about, I think the monitoring and diagnostic side, I think there's huge opportunity. Got to figure out how it works with respect to the economics, but we're going to start caring for patients and not want to see them as much in person. We need to reduce the cost of care, reduce the friction for how they get that care. So they need, what we're picking up in terms of signals on the monitoring side needs to be impactful and important. It's not just, stuff that what are you going to do with it? And then you need software to ingest that data to make it usable for the clinicians to be able to react to it. So I think there's real opportunity on that side. And then I think at-home diagnostics, which you think about, besides the exact labs test for colonoscopy screening, there hadn't been a lot of at-home testing that has really, send it to it here. COVID changed that, and I think people are waking up to all kinds of things where you can, do at-home diagnostics, self-diagnostics, using your mobile phone to be able to capture information. And we're going to think about how we get care differently. That technology is going to be an important part for how we do that, not only on the diagnostic and monitoring, but also on the care side. Let's help for more self-care in the home as well.
Yeah, and we had a discussion around adoption as well in systems as large as yours, and the physicians are necessary but insufficient for adoption of technology.
Yeah, thinking about kind of always knew this, and this has been an evolution over decades now. But the old world of, you think about physician preference devices and surgical devices or things in the cath lab. You got to start with the clinician, check the box. You've got to get them excited. They got to believe in it clinically. This is better for all these different reasons. But the tech assessment committees within the hospital there's still some specialties where they have enormous power and say, I need it. There aren't many of them. You got to go through that tech assessment committee process, and the +1, +2 features, they don't want to bring them in. The system wants less products that are being used than more. And that means they want the right ones, they want innovative ones, but we have 2 hips and knees that we use now. We've got, for the more commodity stuff, we're trying to winnow it. So to raise above that bar in innovation, you not only have to demonstrate better clinical outcome and the physicians like it better, but you got to really focus on what's the impact on the economics and have a case for that as well.
Yeah, nice. And then Rick, your team focuses heavily on IT and healthcare services in addition to med devices.
Yeah.
Can you speak to the ongoing convergence?
Yeah, just hearing Dan speak there, I thought about, I was on the board of a company called Barty Diagnostics, and that was a cardiac rhythm monitoring company. And when COVID happened, right, they were able to quickly go to where the a patient would call into their cardiologist, have some concerns, and then Barty could drop ship the device to the patient's home, and then they could wear the device for 14 days and be monitored. And so it was a cutting edge medical device, right? But they also had 70 readers, right? So there was sort of a services business that we were managing as well, to look at the data, create the reports that could go back to using the data to the cardiologist to give a good report about that individual patient. And then of course there was a huge IT component to it, where we're using AI and machine learning to make it more efficient, faster, and take less time for the reading and higher quality, and be able to to identify arrhythmias quicker and faster. And so I think that that's hard to do, right? Because that's a services business, it's an IT company, and it's a device company, all in one. And they had to be excellent at all of those. And that's why we ended up selling the company, and the buyer ended up paying something like 15 times revenue, because it was clearly a value add business. And so those kinds of remote monitoring technologies are ones that I think we're pretty interested in, and speak to that convergence of IT. I mean, software is sort of eating the world, right? We heard that 15 years ago in Silicon Valley, and I think that is very true in the med device space, right? The data and the ability to do predictive analytics and all that is so exciting, and we're just on the early innings of that.
And Oliver, so your mandate is focused, maybe a bit more focused than others, but even still, you have some fascinating technology that you have access to and are interested in. So
yeah, and actually a lot of those convergences are kind of square in our wheelhouse here at Intuitive Ventures. I think a bias trend that I'm excited about, as you think about the future of robotic and minimally invasive surgery and the penetration and growth that market, multiple players participating in it, will achieve. Think of the data, just Intuitive, as an example, 25 years of embedded sensors in our systems, 10 million procedures. That's a vast amount of data that's powering today a bunch of insights and analytics and solutions for surgeons and how they operate. But for us in ventures, I'm thinking, how does that power the ecosystem? Where are there going to be opportunities to connect in, to leverage that type of rich data set to power the next wave of digital surgery, customizable training, analytics in real time, predictive analytics, as you said, opportunities to close the variability gap, both operational and clinical outcome improvements. So yeah, that's how we look at those opportunities, and how I look at startups when I think about data strategies and maybe opportunities where we can leverage our unique strengths on the Intuitive Venture side to accelerate some of the companies we invest in.
Yeah, that's very cool. And so Amy, what kind of technologies are getting you excited and are you highly focused on?
Yeah, I think shifting, and Dan, you mentioned it related, is being able to shift the site of care. Digital means that you can sort of not be beholden to the same geographic constraints that historically were true. And so suddenly you have an opportunity with technology to shift care to a different setting, and it could be the ASC, it could be home. Now, with that requires a very sophisticated group of, oftentimes service with technology, with device. And so I think that ecosystem is evolving. It's again early stage, but it does actually have implications for the devices at the end, whether it's a less, like if you're not in a hospital setting, you're in an ASC setting, you have a different set of, standards and things you need to hit from a user perspective, from a cost perspective. Same is true in the home, that you have a different set of either technologies or monitoring that enable that. And so, we're really thinking on the hospital side, like a hospital of the future. What does that look like, and what technologies, and then the wraparounds around those technologies that make them possible. So I think that's very exciting, because I think, again, if you take yourself out of the geographic structure of we built hospitals to be very efficient internally, as a system, but then suddenly you don't have that same sort of geographical constraint. How can you use technology? How can you use AI? How can you do that to, be able to leverage expertise across, different sites of care? How can you actually get access to expertise outside of the traditional setting? Because if you think about we're all going through this incredible change of we had to be physically together, which I love, for the record, being physically together. The three-dimensional people is a wonderful thing. But it does open up new doors of being able to, extend the expertise of one person across multiple settings or across multiple times. It doesn't require them to get in a car or get on an airplane every time. But I think it's those kind of technologies, but I think it's going to have to be a systems approach for those to be real and for those things to be realized. And so it's I think we're really excited about how do you construct both the technology at the end, but then what do you wrap around that technology in order, to bring more care to more places.
And TAC, if you could, technologies that you're interested in today, but also this systems perspective, And are you, focused on technologies that can be used across the portfolio or integrated into various other things, or what kinds of things are you thinking about these days?
Yeah, I would echo a lot of the comments by the other panelists around AI, ML, connected devices. We've been talking with Oliver about robotics. I think there's a ton of opportunities, and frankly, we've got a very big services investment team as well that we think about investing together in things. I think there are a lot of places where connected devices, on their own, there may not be enough there, but if you build a service around it, it becomes a multi-billion-dollar opportunity. So when I talk to some of these CEOs that I just want to sell the device, like, it's not enough for us, but if you're willing to build a service around it, we can do something there. And we've got teams that can help us with that. So yeah, we think about that. I'll just go in a slightly different direction. Sort of like traditional med tech. We're still spending a lot of time in neuromodulation. Really excited about stimulating all sorts of nerves to treat all kinds of diseases. And then also still really excited about structural heart. So, spending a lot of time looking at, tricuspid and other valves and the treatment therein. And atrial fibrillation, I think it's still a lot of opportunity there. Left atrial appendage closure has become a massive market. Obviously, atrial fibrillation technologies have become massive as well, and there's still a ton of opportunity there as well.
Thank you. So I'm going to switch it up a little bit. Diversity, equality, inclusion, and accountability are social and organizational drivers that are real and important. And so I'd like to discuss how these concepts impact the work you do. And I'm more interested, I think, in not so much the initiatives within your own teams, although that is interesting, but more how your organizations can use their position in this community to advance these important initiatives broadly. And if I may, I'd like to start with you, Amy, on this.
Sure. Well, I think one thing is just foundationally, it's a talent and representation question. Like, I think, selfishly, like if we're tapping too small a portion of our population, we're not getting enough talent. And then on the representation side, we're also not solving all of the challenges we could be solving. So I think there's an incredible opportunity, and I see it in those lights as opposed to an obligation, even though it often gets painted in that regard. I think as investors, we are driving where the capital goes, and so what companies flourish, and we all get caught in our sort of day-to-day how things are what's efficient, what's in front of you, how do you do that as quickly as possible. But I think there's a real responsibility, but also opportunity to be looking where our capital is going. Who are we funding? What do those teams look like? Are they representing the patients and providers that we are creating solutions for and we're backing? So I think that is something that I think is come to the fore, but I have to be realistic about, like, you have to do the work. You have to create networks of people that don't necessarily look like you, because I think there's a basic affinity bias. I have an affinity bias. I have my Medtech Women organization sitting here right front and center. Yeah! But I think there is an opportunity to break out of what our natural networks look like so that we can tap the talent and opportunities in others. And we have to keep ourselves accountable to it, because I think in fast-paced worlds where we're trying to do a ton of things, if we aren't doing that work and breaking out of our things, we're not going to actually create the solutions with the talent that then have the impact that we're all looking to have in healthcare. So I will get off my soapbox, but I can't get down because I might fall off this chair because it's way too high.
And Tack, can you give some perspective on this as well?
Yeah, I think Amy was going there, but I'll just sort of maybe expand on it and stress it, right? So I think, diversity, inclusion, belonging is super important from an individual perspective. and I think it's important from a checkmark ESG perspective. Everyone looks at the market caps of ESG friendly companies and they're better, right? But I think fundamentally it's actually, when we're biased, it's a market inefficiency and it's a loss to society, actually, right? We as society members all lose. And so I think it's super important to inculcate it not only in what we do in business, but as individuals, to make sure that we're listening to and capturing as much insight and giving everyone the opportunity to stand up and contribute to our society. I think we're just better off. Look, I mean, 1776, right? Americans and we could still be working for a king, right? Or an emperor, depending on, and I could still be, I don't know, in China, right? There's the fact that America has allowed my parents to come here and me to be born here and help out in our society and for us to rise up and replace our king every 4 years. Well, hopefully, okay. We are in Orange County. I'll be careful. But it is. Yeah. But I think it is super important as from a societal perspective. We want to produce the most value for ourselves and our children. To not have these biases.
Thank you for your thoughts on this, and I would love to discuss it more, but I do need to kind of keep things moving along, and so we want to get the audience involved, and we have a few minutes for questions and answers, and all of us will be here through the rest of the event, so we'd love to chat some more. But are there any questions folks would have? Please.
I walk around the event and I see these signs for Reg A+. And I noticed tomorrow morning the keynote speaker is the gentleman who designed the Reg A+ regulations and helped write the regulations. And I'm wondering, how does venture capital work with Reg A+?
Okay, so I'm going to repeat the question so we can get them recorded. So the fundamental question is, how do venture capitalists work with Reg A+?
Yes.
Manage it, yeah. Who would like to take that? Am I going to have to select somebody? Who's good? Jack, I think it's you.
Do we have any regulatory consultants here?
You're hired.
I think everyone should attend that session.
Yeah.
And if anyone can provide me with the Cliff Notes, I'd appreciate it.
So the answer is no?
The answer is no. I don't know.
I'm
The answer is
you're clueless.
come to the keynote in the morning, yeah, and then we can ask him. Any other questions? Maybe a softball question. Oh, over here, please.
I thought it was interesting talking about the reimbursement, the future reimbursement of medical devices and ASCs and sort of the home environment. So can you talk about some near-term examples where you're seeing that start to happen already?
Okay.
Where you think that trend is going to go first?
Yeah, so the question's around reimbursement and at-home care?
Well,
Yeah,
Or just shift.
or the shift.
to reimbursement and or distributed
Yeah, okay. Please.
I'll start. Just simple examples and these aren't even the new ones, but starting with different reimbursement mechanisms around bundles. So like our organization, Providence, now has huge number of contracts for both Medicare and with commercial payers for hips and knee replacement that we're taking basically one payment for kind of a 90-day. So we're everything that happens between us, the visits before and after, we're taking full risk on that. And the implications of that, one were, wow, we better stop sending people to rehab when it's unnecessary. That was an easy one. But there's implications with respect to what goes into that bundle of goods that we're using and physicians are using that we're much more thoughtful about now too. So that's an easy example in terms of a change. Also, we're seeing it, this is a perverse incentive of the US healthcare system, right? Where we make all our money on at a provider system on commercial patients. We try to break even on Medicare and we lose money caring for Medicaid patients the way things work. And we also, the way we make money is on inpatient. So we like to do inpatient, even if it's not necessary, but things have been pushed and saying, well, minimally invasive and all these things, why are we doing it in an inpatient environment where you get paid more? At least put it in a hospital outpatient setting. And why are we even doing it there? Let's put it in a more comfortable, better ambulatory surgery center. Every single payment is lower, right? So hospitals now are understanding that, and we understand that things are moving. And the implications for, that's happening every day. And think about the big surgeries where we make a lot of money in terms of joints and things. They're all moving out into lower cost settings, which, Intuitive, it'd be really interesting to hear. I mean, you've got an incredible technology. I don't know if there's a better example in medtech of a company that's come in and created a category and dominated in terms of continuing to innovate and own it and done incredible things for minimally invasive surgery. But it's an interesting thing, dilemma in terms of as things move out to lower environments, in lower cost environments, we're going to have to think about the technologies we're using, and they need to be as good but cheaper, in those environments.
Oliver.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's going to drive a ton of innovation, as you say, around platform design, around innovative finance mechanisms on the medtech side, right? How do we charge customers? How do we think about value? Demonstrating that evidence up front. And I think you're seeing early stage companies come into the field with that sophistication up front. And Tech said the importance of reimbursement. I think as we look as an investor at early stage companies, seeing that sophistication, seeing the strategies, seeing a pipeline of evidence generation that's not just clinical but ties to healthcare economics, it's so critical. And I think you're going to see it on the platforms, the approaches in some of these lower acuity settings of care.
So the only thing I'd add is that the shift, you're seeing actually movement towards things even like hospital at home, and initiatives there that actually have really taken off, and in some in sort of the payer provider system. And so therefore sort of being creative about what does that ultimately then look like if you've got more integrated plans, actually looking at that as a net savings. And I think that's actually sort of a newer area of momentum.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for our panel tonight. I think everybody should give them a hand, and thank you for everybody.